Hello everyone, welcome to Lush and Salty Aquariums. My name is Stefan. Thank you for coming to my channel. It wasn't long ago I did a video on this aquarium and I'm back at it again because in the previous showcase for this 22.5 gallon ADA planted tank, I showed it to you in dire need of a trim, and some of my viewers supported that concept, and so I thank you for that validation. I know when I need a haircut, and this tank definitely needed one. I've said this before, and I'll say it again now. I just don't like pruning, not because of the chore, but because I don't know, I hate to cut down a living thing. It seems contradictory because plants are not sentient beings, and so the pruning actually benefits their growth. They don't feel any sort of pain or have misgivings. If you cut your plants properly, they almost always bounce back, and sometimes literally twofold. And we talked about that in the last video. Vis-a-vis stems, when you cut them, they will get two growths from where you made the cut. In general though, it just keeps everything stimulated for new growth. And I wanted to show you this aquarium after I did that. Now it's still heavily planted, as is my way, organized chaos, but in my view everything is much more closer to that idealized pseudo-perfection that all of us are trying for in our aquascapes and in our ecosystems. While that's always going to be impossible, only God or Mother Nature, depending on your belief systems or lack of one, only those sorts of entities can achieve perfection. And in the natural world, perfection is a fluid, ever-changing scheme, and in our tanks it is and it isn't. But in this aquarium, I'm as close as I'll probably ever get, in that I don't have any renegade algae, I don't have any unhappy or sick fish, and my plants look good top to bottom. I had cut the top parts of the bacopa, which were starting to droop over. And as you can see, what I love to highlight here is how some stems you can get positive growth all the way from the bottom to the top. And bear in mind, this is a tall aquarium, so the light source, while it's an excellent light, a twin star, that's still a long way to go for the light to hit bottom. And some stem plants, or some plants in general, just aren't going to do as well depending on how many inches or centimeters from your light source to the base of the plant. Bacopa, fortunately, at least this strain, seems to be thriving in those conditions. Whereas this Blixa japonica is doing, I would give it a B-. It's not as lush and plush, and it seems to be static in its growth. These little red tops here came from this wonderful cluster of super red mini, which is in the back here. It's showing more pink than super red, which is interesting because in my other tank it is the iconic super duper red, almost like red velvet. Here, a more, what's the right word, delicate pink, if you will. But I don't have many dying leaves unless you go to the very bottom into the shady part. And in most cases, that's going to happen. And if we have an aquascape that more or less blocks the view from down there, I think we're all right. Eventually, you do have to replant the entire plant, just putting the tops in there. But in typical trim sessions, for a few months, you can just cut and replant the tops and let the bottom receive some new light and work with that group such as it is. Now the Ludwigia repens, I'm letting it grow out of the water. Now that can be dangerous sometimes when plants start to receive the incredible benefit of CO2 from the air as opposed to the water column. They can become rapidly accustomed to that versus what is happening in here. And I don't want to jeopardize this lovely solid plant growth down here. So if the plant devotes all its resources to grabbing CO2 and light from out here, I hope it is not at the expense of down here. Typically I would cut these two tops and replant them, and I would have already done that. And I may still, if I see any adverse effects from letting it grow out of the water. On the left side, I've got Limonphilia hyperoides, which is this plant here, and some Rotala. I don't know the exact species. They're kind of mixed together. Well, not kind of, they are. Originally they were side by side, but there just wasn't enough real estate to create a true column of one and the other, so they've kind of formed a little bit of a bond there. I've got the fabulous Christmas moss on yet another one of my magnetized holders. Search those out, because man, oh man, you're just never going to get moss like that anywhere else. And that's because it's close to the light, but yet there's total and complete flow top to bottom, so there's no dead spots. And if you don't believe me, just ask this cherry shrimp. He's really enjoying the view from up there. This is Crypticorn balancea, one of my favorite crypts. I mean, look at the color, texture, and growth on that leaf. Just fantastic. Slow growing at first, like all crypts, but eventually that rhizome or rootstock can get pretty robust, and you have to be mindful or it'll insidiously take over. But you could say that about a lot of plants. I took 2 leaves from that dwarf red tiger lotus. I took 2 out, and I already see a new one down at the bottom. Cutting this plant, usually people do it to prevent the leaves from going all the way to the top and blocking all your light. This particular variety tends to grow the leaves fatter and fatter as opposed to higher and higher. Either way, I have to prune it. At the bottom, I do not have a true carpet at all, but a combination of plants. You saw the Blixa japonica and the toppings from the Super Red Mini. There's Sterigen repens, and there's kind of a group of them there. You see a fabulous ivory mystery snail cruising about down there. And there's an Amano shrimp, and there are some of my Panda Coreodoras. There's at least a dozen of them in here, but I don't see all of them as a group. There's another, unless it's at feeding time. And then, of course, the schooling fish. I've got SP rasboras, those bronze Art Deco-like fish. Look at that sheen. They are a bit smaller and a bit more shiny, and I think prettier than their cousin, the Harlequin rasbora. And then you see some sparring, fun, vigorous Black Phantom tetras. What a great name, Black Phantom tetras. That turquoise surrounding the black marking, I love seeing that in this fish. It's such a rare color to see in an aquarium fish, kind of whitish turquoise. The males have higher dorsal fins, like that one in the back there, and the females tend to have a bit more red. It's always ideal to have at least 6, and males and females. There's a chubby female ember tetra, and then of course there's the lone honey gourami. That's the flame version. They come in various different color morphs. He or she is very happy to be a solitary member of his tribe, and that's the great thing about those fish. I call them the alternative to a beta because they're so gentle and yet they're so colorful, and you only need one, which is not usually the case with aquarium fish. Like all these schooling fish, they feel most comfortable in groups. I have rummy nose rasboras in here, and there's a male right there with the red nose and that silver shark sheen. This is an older male, is losing some of his color. Doesn't help that he's out of focus either. And the females don't have any color whatsoever, and there's a couple of them in here. But I like having males and females wherever possible, whenever possible. There's an Amano shrimp doing what they do best, just feasting on the beautiful strands from that Christmas moss. The outside growth, the pothos, it's a nice bush that's dropping a beautiful, shiny, new, forever growing tendril right there. Those you do have to just simply hack, and as I started this video, I don't even like doing that, but it must be done. These plants will continue to grow, although I see a dead leaf there, which you can simply remove. I might even be able to do it in real time. You just kind of carefully pull it away. All right, well, that didn't work. It's not quite dead yet, but you just pop those off, usually. Just focusing in on that mystery snail. Mystery snails, while they can be a pet, well, they are an invasive pest in certain waterways. They're a lovely aquarium snail for us in the hobby. They do a great job cleaning various kinds of algae. And nothing else is a combination of so big and cumbersome, yet so elegant and delicate at the same time. That contrast of traits make them a really fabulous actor in your stage set. I like to have 2 or 3 in all my aquariums, and I prefer the gold and the ivory, but magenta's awesome too. And if they're happy and healthy, frankly, they're all awesome. This aquarium is run by that's filtered by an Oase Biomaster, the 350. The lily pipes meet with it right down here. Now this is literally outside the aquarium, but to help offset its, looks, I put it in this lovely cedar box from the Container Store. And if it passes my wife's test for being exposed and not causing her any strife, then it passes my test. And the form and function, like the CO2 canister to the right, the form and function are balanced on either side of this dresser. Some of the drawers are out, so that ruins the total symmetry of this shot. But you can see those 2 bronze totems, those bookends on either side of the aquarium. All that is part of trying to integrate this living art into static art. I think these are beautiful. They were gifted to me a long time ago. And as you can see, I'm running the CO2 cord or tube through the legs of this bronze statue, and it's performing a great job for me, whereas these suction cups are not. They never do. Suction cups, if you can use magnets in as many applications as possible, you're going to get a better result. The Oase filter has a heater built in, and I keep this tank about 79, maybe 80, depends. I have adjusted it from time to time. Sometimes when I clean the filter, I might inadvertently affect the heater, so I do check it from time to time. But anything between 78 and 81 is good for these inhabitants. Flying over the top, the drone picture, you see some Brazilian pennywort. And this resembles in a lot of ways a Wallstead aquarium from this perspective. The groupings of plants, the reds and the greens and the yellows and the different kinds of greens. That's Brazilian pennywort right up top, the floating plant there. And it's somewhat attached to this exposed piece of driftwood, ironwood, which in the beginning was such a beautiful hardscape. And back in the day, I didn't want it to be overtaken by plants. Well, that happened, but I've got no regrets because this is one of my favorite tanks, and it's, in my eyes, showing as well as I could have ever hoped. I know we talked about this aquarium not too long ago, and I beg your pardon. Doing these videos on YouTube, fish tubes as I call them, my favorite thing is to look at your tanks and just listen to you talk about them, the plants and the animals inside of it. And so that's generally going to be what most of my content is versus, say, product reviews. If anyone had any questions about some of the products I use, just ask me and I'll tell you versus doing an entire video about it. I'm super happy to help. It makes me feel good and enables me in this hobby. And any tips or tricks I can impart onto you, it's my pleasure to do so. Speaking of which, here's a fun little trick. I took 2 pieces of river stone and placed them on the light, which is hanging, so that it would be slightly at an angle to push more of that par towards the back of the tank and towards those stems. So certain hacks are as simple and as old school and as fun as that. And those 2 white rocks haven't fallen in weeks, knock on wood. But because of that pothos back there, it can block the light at the very far back of the aquarium glass. And you can see that right then and there. And these stem plants want as much light as possible. So my solution was, as you see, to put 2 river rocks carefully on top. And if they did fall in, and they haven't, what's the worst that can happen? They fall to the bottom and I take them out. I'm so happy you could see the peaceful, pleasant nature of all these creatures enjoying their habitat. I mean, that's what it's all about. I hope you agree. I think you do. And as always, folks, keep your hands in the tank, albeit carefully. Ciao for now.